Hello and welcome to the Sharpening Report. I am your host, Josh Peck. Tonight we have a very special episode for you. We are welcoming back to the show Gary Wayne, author of The Genesis 6 Conspiracy, How Secret Societies and the Descendants of Giants Plan to Enslave Humankind, and The Genesis 6 Conspiracy Part 2, How Understanding Prehistory and Giants Help Define End-Time Prophecy. And that second book will be the topic of tonight's show. Glad to have you back, Gary. How are you doing?
Well, doing pretty well, and very happy to be back, and looking forward to talking about the book a little bit more. And it's kind of an important day. It's got the official release out there today for my book. So I was able to pick up a Kindle version on it last Friday off of .ca, Amazon.ca. .au had it available, .uk had it available, but not .com. So some people have already bought some of the digital versions, and also there went up over the weekend 3 5-star ratings, so a pretty good start from that.
Yeah, that's great.
Now for Amazon, they've already started shipping the book. I've been getting emails with pictures and pictures on Facebook of people who bought through Amazon or other people online, and so they're starting to receive them. I have not received my books yet, so anybody listening to this, and I'm going to be trying to get some information out on that today, seeing as how this is the official release date. My books for my inventory were shipped 2 weeks ago. They were supposed to be shipped a month ago, but they opted to ship all of the books off the first print run to the retailers because they were oversold. And so a second and third run I've had. So my shipment left about 2 weeks ago, but I don't have them yet. They're lost somewhere. So we're trying to track them down, probably caught up in customs. So it's the only thing I could think of. But to date, and we've been tracing since, I've been trying to get my publisher to trace since Thursday. We don't know exactly where they're at. All we know is when they shipped and who they were shipped with. And there's so much turmoil at the printers right now that they're not exactly giving us the information that I would desperately want, because I want to start to inform people as to when they can start getting their books.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, hopefully that all works out soon, and it's a phenomenal book from what I've been able to read. And what's really cool is you offer excerpts of the book if people want to check it out before they buy. People can go to Genesis 6 Conspiracy, and that's the number 6. Genesis number 6 conspiracy.com, and you can check out the book there. Last time we had you on, you have 7 sections in this book, and the last time we had you on, I believe we dealt with section 4. So I wanted to skip ahead a little bit because we can't give the whole book away for free for everybody. I want people to pick this up. So I wanted to skip ahead to section 6, which is prehistory, history, and prophecy. Yeah. And you have a short description here that says, post-Diluvian history was shaped by the 6 beast empires and will once more be shaped by the end time 7th and 8th beast empire. So let's start right off the bat with chapter 58, and people don't feel daunted about there being so many chapters in here. It is packed with information, but it's really easy to read. And I think people will really like it. So let's start with Pharaoh and the beast empires. What are these empires, and which Pharaoh are we talking about?
Yeah, so Section 5, which we didn't cover off, is an extraordinarily terrific section for Christians, and it leads into Section 6. And what's in Section 5 is all of the giant wars after the flood that are discussed in the Bible. So I go through not only Genesis 14, but all the individual campaigns in the Exodus wars, and show you how we know they're fighting against giants and hybrid giants, and all the way through the book of Judges, and all the way through King Saul, King David, and down through King Solomon. And the important thing to remember is, as we talk about moving into Section 6, Section 6 is a transition from prehistory. So the first part of the book was designed to walk through prehistory, give you a lot of information that's in the Bible, deeper than any other book that's out there on the market today, start to highlight important words, terms, and concepts that are used in end-time prophetic allegory. So once that's done, then I start to transition to a section 6 into the last section, which is all prophecy. And this is going to continue with what was done in the first 5 sections, but in the transition mode. So it's partly history, partly prophecy in a lot larger way. So in section 5, Israel coming out of Egypt is in one of the beast empires. So the beast empires, as I explained throughout the book, are the dynastic bloodlines and the sort of embryos of the Antichrist wannabes that are coming to power. And so we have Michael, who fights against the beast empires, but not from them rising, as the book of Daniel talks about, but to ensure Antichrist doesn't come to power until the ordained time. So all of these beast empires are trying to present an Antichrist type figure. So Israel, in its concept and creation, is going to be intimately connected throughout its history with the beast empires. So it grows up, and there's 7 beast empires, as we learn in the book of Revelation in chapter 12, 13, and 17, which is an add-on to the 5 empires discussed in the book of Daniel, and Daniel 2 and the metallic empires, and Daniel 7 with the beast empires, where I draft the term beast empires, and Daniel 8, which is also talking about beast empires, but with a different additional piece of information to what the book of Revelation is talking about. So you have 7 empires in Daniel 8, but it comes through adding more information about the Antichrist and the end time empire through that sort of understanding through the Greek Empire. And so Alexander would be that first empire in that prophecy. You would have then the empire, the beast empire of Greece, that is split up into 4 empires. Rome will succeed it. It's also part of the Greek Empire, one of the 4. And so now you have that is 6 empires, and then the last empire that is a direct extension in an allegorical form from the Greek Empire, and Alexander rises in the end time, so 7. The other allegory that is understood is that you have Assyria and Egypt as the 2 beast empires. So you can use Nimrod and Babel or Assyria, whichever one you choose, as being that beast empire. And Israel is connected to all of these beast empires. So it is raised into a nation in Israel, and then God frees them through Moses out of that beast empire. So there's an intimate relationship there that they grow from inception into full nationhood. And then Assyria is the first one of the beast nations that are going to act against Israel in a way that is from the curses of the Holy Covenant. So they're there, and they would take all of Israel and the southern kingdom, Judah, into exile, except that the southern kingdom repents. So it's just the northern kingdom where the lost tribes, where the tribes get lost into the nations. And so all throughout history, you have these beast nations interacting. So now the next one is Babylon, which takes Judah into exile. And then Persia, Medes rises, and they permit them to go back and build the temple. Greece rises, which we already talked about, and they actually do a form of an abomination and dominate Israel. And then Rome comes and does the diaspora and destroys Jerusalem and the temple in 70 AD. All the way through, they're interconnected with Israel. So it's an important context to understand end-time prophecy, and accordingly, those beast empires rise as or an extension of the beast empire, and it rises in the end time with the 7th empire. They're going to be intimately related to the fulfillment of Israel and Judean end time prophecy. So in section 6, chapter 58, we're talking about Pharaoh and the beast empires. And this is really from a conceptual basis, and then specifically with some passages, particularly in the book of Ezekiel, about Pharaoh as one of these Rephaim bloodline beast kings, understanding that Egypt was the first of the beast empires. But, for example, in Ezekiel 32, where I'm going to be talking a fair bit about in section 6, this is the passage of the terrible ones. And the terrible ones is the Hebrew word erit. And if you put ones on there, which the translators have inserted for plural, that would be eritim. And it means all sorts of words that would describe Rephaim kings. They're strong, they're powerful, they're tyrants, with a few other interesting add-ons, which is we've talked about, I think, a little bit previously in the book, is that they were childless and had fertility issues, which is why they had to intermarry with humans. And that word erit is the root word for the Ugaritic text. So Ug, erit, that's the city of Og, as I explained earlier on in the book. And Kiryat Ugarit is how it would be understood, just as you have Kiryat Arba for the city of Arba. So Pharaoh is talking to some interesting people in Ezekiel 32. And there's two groups. One is the terrible ones, and one are the mighty, which is the Hebrew word El for angels. And he's talking to them in the pit prison. So they're actually communicating to him in this prophecy, whether it's actually literal or it's just providing us context. And I look at this as part of a dual prophecy, which I think we've also talked about, that has significant meaning in prehistory. So you have the pit prison and things going on here. You have the prophecy as it's applicable for the time of the prophet and also for the end time. And these terrible ones, when you go through the list of those names, like the Assyrian or Meshech and Tubal, these are important kings for the end time, particularly with Antichrist, and particularly with the Gog war, where you have Gog, chief prince of Meshech, Gog of Magog, chief prince of Meshech, in Ezekiel 38 and 39, which is the war that I think is the counterfeit Armageddon that Antichrist rises to power on. That is equivalent to Joel 1 and 2. Joel 3 would be the Armageddon war, and Revelation 9. And so this is part of that sort of great sort of deception to accept Antichrist. So he's a beast king in that wannabe bloodline dragon messiah, like the terrible ones that are in the pit prison. And they're called the terrible ones because they did terrible things to humankind while they were on earth, and they were killed, likely beheaded, which I cover decapitation of how that all connects in here in book 2. And those ones are sent to the sides of the pit, in the pit prison. And these are the ones that are talking with Pharaoh. Like, it is an absolutely scary, frightening, I guess disturbing, something that might send cognizant dissonance if you're not into the preternatural nature of the Bible as to what's going on. And that these are the ones that are going to be released in the end time, along with the mighty, the fallen angels, El, the Elohim, small case, E, when the pit prison is opened. And then I connect these allegories back to Pharaoh and in Ezekiel 32 in other chapters with Pharaoh, so that you understand these are all about the same concept in terms of the time of the prophet and for the end time, and some of the interesting allegories that go with it. And I also have a chapter that I go through the details of the terrible ones, just a couple chapters down in chapter 61. So this is a terrific sort of transition, because it's transitioning so much into the end time, and it's giving you those a lot of names and terms that you're going to need for end time prophecy.
And that, yeah, excuse me, that's absolutely fascinating, because a lot of times we try to piece together how this timeline works, and I think you've done a phenomenal job. Right before that chapter on the terrible ones, you have a chapter called The Mysterious Trees of Eden. What did your research bring up there?
Well, yeah, so in these trees of Eden in Ezekiel 31, you have the Assyrian tree. Well, that makes no sense, right? So it's one of those understandings of the dual prophecy is that it gives you important information of prehistory for context. And it's also talking about empires and individuals at the time of the prophet, and also an allegory for the end times. So the Assyrian, there's no way there could be an Eden. That's before the flood. So there's something else going on. These trees of Eden are, and we know there's two trees, but these are separate trees. The two trees that we're told about literally are the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. But now you have all of these other trees. And this Assyrian is an allegory for Satan and Eden. And when you have all of these branches and the covering and everything that is falling underneath his covering, is talking about Satan in the end time, and then how that connects into the beast empires is a significant sort of understanding of this tree allegory, because as I get into this section, I have a chapter 69 called the Thelemic Tree. And that's how the polytheists, they always try and draft things in from the Bible in terms of making their counterfeits. So the thelemic tree comes from the Greek word thelem, which means God's will. And so in the occult belief that you have free will and, to do anything that you want, is where they sort of take that meaning from. And then they mistranslate it a couple times in a sexual nature. And I'll identify those in that chapter as well, to give you the two examples there as a marker for them, because they believe in free sexual will as well, whether it's with them on earth or the angels and their free sexual will. And this thelemic tree is the will of God, but in their understanding, the will of their celestial mafia godfather. Or the pantheon of gods, however you want to sort of understand that. And the thelemic tree is broken into two different trees that I walk through. And this sort of gets into some of the secret society stuff, but it's important to understand what they believe and how they want to bring about the end times. So they have the genealogical tree, which is one of the thelemic trees. And so in that concept, that is like this elm tree or an ash tree or an oak tree, and understanding biblically ash and elm are kind of used interchangeably, and oak is the holy tree of the Tuatha De Danann and the Datanu, and that the oak and the ash are part of the trees of Mount Hermon. Just as the oak is used to describe the Amorites in terms of their strength in the book of Amos 2. And this is from their what they would call their gene of Isis, a genealogical tree, and that they have specific genses. So LB gens, which I covered in book 1, which is kind of the royales of the Europe, but more of the northern aspect, and into England and France as well. You have the Julia gens, for example, which is the gens of the black nobility of the Italians, which goes back to the patrician families and Augustus and Caesar, through the senators, back to Romulus and Remus and the specific gods. They have lots of different allegories, not only the gene of Isis, but the fairy gens or the elven gens. This is the gens, and this is the genealogical tree that they track. So that's their invention. And I also take you back where that comes from the incredible line of the kings of Jerusalem crowned in 1118 in a small priory on the rock of Sion. So it gets really sort of a lot of intrigue going there. But the more important one is the organizational structure, which is a cedar tree, an evergreen cedar tree from Mount Hermon. And in that, you have the roots, just as with the ash tree or the elm tree, has roots that's going into Sheol or Hades, which is their heaven. That's where they get their power from. So genealogical, that's the gens sort of source, but the cedar of of Lebanon, the cedar of Mount Hermon, is the power and the authority. So just as all of the kings received the divine right to rule from Mount Hermon, that's the source of their power. So you have all of these different trunk organizations, which I give the hierarchy, which I kind of outline in book 1, but I give you the specific from the 13 families down to Freemasonry, and then I show you how the branch organizations intersect into that thelemic tree, and then where they take that thelemic tree back in their occult history and when they start to introduce that. These are their terms. Now, taking that back, understanding of how important trees are, as in the world tree, which is again part of the allegory of the thelemic trees. All these trees in Eden are angelic trees that they're talking about. And the most important one is Satan and his beast empires that extend out of that. And so the occult forces take those two terms and they form their hierarchical structure in their organizations on earth to do, as they say, is as above, so below, because they believe in that type of what's playing out here is the same thing that plays out in the other realm.
That's interesting. And so do you think that that's going to have to do with the end time one world religion, and will these figures that you write about called the great and mighty men of the end times, what will they have to do with that as well?
Well, yeah. So one of the intriguing things about the Bible is it's written in two languages originally, Hebrew for the Old Testament and Greek in the New Testament. And whether or not they were trying to translate from Aramaic or Hebrew, as they were, I mean, I'll leave that up to other historians, but what we get is Greek. And so it's very difficult to get the cognate terms in sort of that's exactly the application, because you're looking for context and say, how does that link into the Old Testament? It has to fit. So for an example, so in the New Testament, when it has affliction and tribulation, for the tribulation aspect of, Revelation 7, Matthew 24:7, Matthew 24:21, Mark 13:19, for example, you can see affliction or tribulation being used, and the word is the Greek word thlipsis. And it's used for two different kinds of tribulations, one for the saints, one for the tribulation of the world not seen since the beginning. And we know it's the same word because where it says in Matthew 24:21, the great tribulation of the world not seen since the beginning of creation, Mark 13:19 uses the word affliction there. Exact same parallel prophecy, and both of those words go back to thlipsis, just as affliction or afflicted does in Matthew 24:28, and just as tribulation in Revelation 7, the tribulation saints goes back to thlipsis as well. And that has a Greek word. That Greek word thlipsis has a cognate word, sarah, transliterated starting with a T in the Old Testament. So in the time of Jacob's trouble, Sarah, they're going to be saved out of this great tribulation. You can start to match things up, and that's the same word, troubled, Sarah. That's when Daniel rises in Daniel 12, which is the midpoint of the last 3.5 years when you have the war in heaven. So he has sat down by inference, and Antichrist has come to power if he is the restrainer, and I think it's a good possibility he is, him or the Holy Spirit. I'm good either way, but seems to fit better with me now. Whereas before I used to be on the Holy Spirit side, but now I'm more on the Michael side. Antichrist has come to power. So you can start to use some of those words to say it's marking chronology and it's the same meaning. There's just, unfortunately, they're in two different languages. So if the giants are going to have something to do with the end time, then we ought to be able to match up terms from the Old Testament with the New Testament. And that's what chapter 62, the great and mighty men of the end time, is about, is saying, how do we know that the kings that are being talked about in Revelation are the same bloodlines or kinds of rulers that were in the beast empires before, other than we know there's a beast empire of the end time, but is this exactly in the same sort of model? And so I make those connections. So, for example, in Joel, 1 through 3, you have the words mighty one being used, just as in Ezekiel 39. And in both of those applications, this is the counterfeit Armageddon and Armageddon as you get into Joel 3 and in Ezekiel 39. These are the mighty ones and the passengers that are connected to the Rephaim through the Hebrew word abar and Passover and crossover and death, just as sometimes Rapha is 7496 for spirit, demon, shade is associated with death, as in the book of Job and a few other applications. So you have these mighty ones that show up in Old Testament prophecy. So I start to connect those to the words that are used to describe these kings in the book of Revelation. And there's two key words that are used to describe them that are in Greek. So mega and megastranes. And so I start to trace those words back, provide their full meanings and their etymology. And as you take them back, they're going to mean words like, say, mega, for example, is going to mean great, as in great stature, in great age, in mass, in height. And as you take that word as it goes back into the etymology I like to use Webster's for my etymology, large, huge, chief, weighty, bloodline descendant. I mean, and I put all of this down. So when it says in Revelation 6:15, the kings of the earth, the great men, that's megas. And so you also have megastranes, which for great men in Revelation 18:23, for example, and that means lords, nobles, grandees, and grandees is from megagistos, which is part of the whole megastanes and megas Greek words. And so I walk through all of that without getting into too much minutia and show you that these are the same people that are described in the Armageddon battle as described in the Old Testament and the New Testament, and these are royals, the kings of God, Rex Deus, as I call them in Book 1. So that's what that's designed to do, is to show you that this end-time beast empire that rises out of the Rephaim beast empires has intimate connections to those beast empires, and that we should expect an influence of not only the descendants of those bloodlines, but we also should be prepared for other interaction of giants, whether or not they're recreated or whether or not these 10 kings, for example, are taking on demons and hosting them to provide them additional power. And so in the occult, they believe they can control demons through rituals and words and somehow bring them in and control them. I don't know whether that happens or not, or it's just they're just not fighting back on the inside, like somebody who says something's come in and possessed me, and it turns really ugly because you're trying to throw that demon spirit out, I would presume, because I've never been possessed, but seems to be the case. So there's a connection there in the end time to these beast empires, just as Ezekiel 32 is talking about these beast empires and these ones that are coming back out of the pit prison before the midpoint of the last 7 years, before the Gog War, before the Joel 1 and 2 War, and before the Armageddon War.
Man, that's so interesting. Well, for everybody at home, we got a lot more to talk about, but we're going to do that in the members only section at dailyrenegade.com. So if you are viewing for free on YouTube or Rumble, head on over to dailyrenegade.com. We're going to continue the conversation. We got a lot more to talk about. One thing that I'm really interested in is the first woe, these scorpion creatures that come out of the abyss. And I definitely want to get Gary's opinion on that. And if you are watching, please head on over to to genesis6conspiracy.com, and that is the number 6, Genesis, the number 6, conspiracy.com to get more information on this absolutely phenomenal book. So once again, head on over to dailyrenegade.com. It's only $10 a month or $100 a year. If you can do the $100 a year, I suggest doing that because it's cheaper in the long run, and you technically get 2 months free doing it that way. We also, for those of you who have been following us, we have updated the website. It works beautifully now. We got rid of that old Wix website that was giving us so many problems, and we went over to Uscreen, and it looks beautiful. There's even a community tab which runs. It really works a lot like Facebook, so we've all been posting on there, and you can make your own profile. It's really cool. And then the actual video page looks and runs a lot like YouTube, and it has all of our full videos that we can't put on YouTube, mostly because of censorship issues. So if you want all of that, again, head on over to dailyrenegade.com, where we will continue this conversation. So if you are viewing on the website, just hang on the line. You don't have to do anything. We're going to continue in a moment. And for everybody viewing for free, thank you so much. And until next time, take care and God bless.